Hello everyone. Today I am going to discuss General Studies Mains Paper 1 questions which are in the category of medieval or modern India. So, going by the number, the first question regarding modern India was question number 3, and the question number 3 reads like, evaluate the policies of Lord Curzon and their long-term implications on the national movement. So, this question demands that what all policies Curzon had pursued which led to have an effect on the national movement, or which you can say propagated or led to the growth of the national movement. So class, before going to that point of the policies pursued by Lord Curzon, I want to tell you something about Curzon. Curzon was appointed as Viceroy in the year 1899. He served India as Viceroy in the year 1899 to 1905. And one of the reasons for his appointment as Viceroy, that he was that kind of person in England in those years, in that contemporary era, that nobody knew more than Curzon about Asian affairs. So his immense knowledge about Asian affairs had led to his appointment as Viceroy. And he was an imperialist to the core. How can I guess this thing from that, how can I tell this thing that he was an imperialist? In 1898 in London, he had remarked what? That if Britain would lose any of its colonies, it won't have any effect on us. But if you lose India, the sun will set over the British Empire. So quite obviously this statement of Curzon implies that how significant India was for the British Empire. So at any means, at any cost, Curzon did not want that India should be slipping away from the control of the British. And while being in India as a Viceroy, he started pursuing such policies so as to maintain the British stranglehold over the Indian possessions. And in that direction, the first thing which he had brought about was Calcutta Corporation Amendment Act 1899. Means, I am now going to analyze all those points or all those policies which had been pursued by Curzon which led to the accentuation or growth of the national movement. So the first thing is Calcutta Corporation Amendment Act 1899. By this Calcutta Corporation Amendment Act in 1899, what he did, he increased the strength of the nominated members over the elected members by bringing, okay. He increased the strength of the nominated members over the elected. Before this year, in the municipal committees or corporations, there were two ways through which people make entry. One was election and there was nomination. So, quite obvious that Indians will prefer election mode. Why? Because that will give them more chance to get entry into the municipal corporations. But he did what? He increased the strength of the nominated members over the elected. And when it comes to nomination, it's quite obvious that governor or the viceroy will nominate, and when he will nominate all those people who would be loyal, or you can say loyalist section of the Indian people or even British. So that was one thing which led to quite anger among the Indians. Secondly, what he did, that he organized Delhi Darbar. Curzon organized Delhi Darbar in the year 1902 to mark the accession of Edward VII. Edward VII ascended the throne in the year 1901 in England as the new ruler, because the previous one, that is Victoria, she had died and he became the ruler. So in order to mark this accession over the throne of England, Curzon organized a darbar in Delhi and spent more than 2 million rupees. So Indians did not like this spending of money at a time when India was in the grip of famine in the year 1900-1901. Because our money had been wasted like this by organizing an event of pomp and show, which obviously nationalist leaders had criticized. Thirdly, what he brought about, that Curzon was very much, you can say, skeptical of the students studying in the colleges and the universities. If you go 20 years earlier before the appointment of Curzon, means somewhere around 1880s onwards, in the decade of 1880s, there was a proliferation of mushrooming of Indian colleges, universities, private colleges and universities. Several youth had entered into the colleges and universities, and at the same time, nationalist awakening or nationalism was also gradually spreading in India. So these students, these college-going students, were quite attracted by the nationalist leaders. So Curzon, when he arrived in India, he thought he perceived that these colleges and universities were breeding ground for the revolutionary terrorism. So in order to keep a check on the revolutionary activities, he brought the act, and in fact, he appointed in the year 1902 Indian University Commission. So the third thing which Curzon had brought about, Indian University Commission, he appointed in the year 1902. And this commission was headed by someone called as British officer Thomas Raleigh. Thomas Raleigh. And based on its recommendations, he passed an act called as Indian University Act 1904. And this Indian University Act put Senate under check. Senate was the highest authority, highest administrative body of the universities. But the decisions of the Senate could be disapproved by the governor. So that was also resented by the Indians. This move of Curzon also was resented by the Indians. Fourthly, he brought Indian Official Secrets Act 1904. Indian Official Secrets Act 1904, it limited the freedom of the press. So all these policies in a way contributed, or it had a long-term implication on the national movement, and it led to the spread of the national movement. But apart from these four policies, the most important thing which had the greatest impact on the national movement was the division of Bengal. Curzon came to India, and Curzon wanted to weaken the nationalist movement. Bengal in those times, in the first decade of the 20th century, was the epicenter upsurge of nationalist upheaval, nationalist movement. So in order to weaken the nationalist unity, Curzon thought to divide Bengal. But he gave an excuse to the Indian leadership that Bengal is too big to be administered from the single city capital Calcutta, and that's the reason that I am going to divide, or government is thinking to divide. But nationalist leaders were not fooled that they could not understand the hidden agenda, hidden motive of Curzon. So the plan was to befool the Indian leadership that Curzon gave an excuse that Bengal was too big, and therefore he was thinking of dividing Bengal, comprising East Bengal and West Bengal. But see how Curzon had led to such a division, how he is going to place one community in minority and the other in majority. In the East Bengal of those times, which is presently you can say Assam plus Bangladesh combined, he put what? Muslims in majority than the Hindus. And in the West Bengal of those times, comprise the present West Bengal plus Bihar plus Jharkhand plus Odisha. What he did? Here he put Hindus more in number than the Muslims, so that a kind of minority-majority feeling could be created among the people of India or among the people of Bengal. This was the act which had brought the greatest effect on the national movement of those times, because Indian leadership categorically rejected this division of Bengal. And it led to, you can say, the beginning of a new movement, new era, and that is what? Swadeshi and boycott movement. So Curzon's policy of dividing Bengal had led to the Swadeshi and boycott movement, and Swadeshi and boycott movement brought a new gamut of leadership in the Indian national movement, as well as it was the first movement which had led to participation of the masses also, though on a limited scale, at least in Bengal. but yes, it brought tremendous change in the nationalist upsurge, nationalist movement. So through all these policies, we can analyze that Curzon's policies or Curzon's ill-conceived decisions had led to the growth of nationalist movement. And for us, obviously, it was not liked by the Indians, but for us, it was good, because I would put it like this, that bad rulers are often a blessing in disguise. Bad rulers will bring bad decisions, and their negative impact will obviously, in the long term, will help the Indians or will help people to get benefit out of it. So this was question number 3. It's over. Now the next question is question which I'm going to talk about is question number 12. And question number 12 comes from the medieval Indian history. And the question is Persian literary sources of medieval India. Persian literary sources of medieval India reflect the spirit of the age. Comment. Persian literary sources of medieval India reflect the spirit of the age. Comment. 250 word, this question. See class, first of all, as far as history is concerned, history is based on evidences. History is based on sources. History is not a story that whatever you want to tell about the past, anyone can easily digest it, or you can say accept it. You have to present facts, you have to substantiate those things with the argument. And when it comes to, you can say substantiating the things, then primary source, or you can say that contemporary source, is of utmost relevance. And it is of here that Persian language assumes special significance. How? I'm going to tell you. See, Persian as a form of literary expression, it had developed around the 3rd quarter of the 9th century. And it originated in Iran, but it came into contact, the language came into contact with the Indian subcontinent when Sindh was annexed by the Safarid kingdom of Iran. So gradually Persian came into contact with the Indian subcontinent. But the growth of the Persian language gradually evolved with the establishment of the Turkish rule in India, led by Muhammad Ghori and Qutbuddin Aibak, the sultans of Delhi. Once Turkish rule was established, Persian, it saw the growth of the Persian language, because the Delhi Sultanate or the Delhi Sultans made it as a court language. Not only court language, you can say all the revenue grants began to be given, or the official documents began to be issued in the Persian language. Gradually this Persian language, starting with the Turkish rule, starting with the period of the Delhi Sultanate, reached its peak phase under the Mughals. Though despite Persian language reaching its peak phase under the Mughals, but previously even the Delhi Sultans also patronized, you can say, poets, literary figures, historians, and that led to what you can say monumental works, classic works being written in the Persian language in the Delhi Sultanate period. So the question says that Persian literary sources of medieval India reflect the spirit of the age. Comment. So what was the spirit of the age, or what things were there prevalent in that medieval era? It can only be useful, it can only be known to us once we know about the Persian medieval sources. So in this period, if you want to study about the people, the state, the kingdom, the rulers of the medieval times, you have to have knowledge about the Persian language if you want to rely on the contemporary sources. You can study medieval India in English language, obviously, but the more you can say authoritative historian, they study Persian language to know about the contemporary writers. So one of the contemporary writers of the medieval time of the Delhi Sultanate was Ziauddin Barni. Ziauddin Barni. He was, you can say, a great historian of the Delhi Sultanate, and he had written several books. The prominent one was Tarikh-e-Firoz-Shahi, and the second was Fatwa-e-Jahandari. In Tarikh-e-Firoz-Shahi, he covers a period starting from Balban and ends up with the first 6 years of Firoz Shah Tughlaq. And in this book, he gives information about the contemporary agrarian system as well as the economic system of Delhi Sultanate. And see, this ruler Balban, the Delhi Sultanate ruler Balban, he also claims himself as a descendant of Iranian mythical hero Afrasiyab. So Balban portrays himself as a hero of what you can say that mythical figure Afrasiyab, and that has also been portrayed by Barni in this book Tarikh-e-Firoz-Shahi. As you know that Alauddin Khilji was a very strong ruler, so the same way he had presented in the book Tarikh-e-Firoz-Shahi. In the second book, that is Fatwa-e-Jahandari, this is a book on, you can say, statecraft, or this is a book on governance. So it is about the political theory, that how the ruler should rule the continent, the subcontinent, or the Delhi Sultanate. That is written in the Fatwa-e-Jahandari. Another eminent author which had led to the growth of who had contributed to the growth of the Persian language, he was Amir Khusro. Amir Khusro mainly wrote in poetic style, and his prominent books include, one was Kiran-u-Sadai. In this book, this book deals about the you can say reconciliation between the ruler Kaikubad and his father Bughra Khan. Apart from this Kiran-u-Sadai also gives information about the water tank in Delhi, about the congregational mosque in Delhi where people used to offer namaz or prayers in collective. So this is a very, you can say, important book about the contemporary sources, or it reflects, it gives information about the contemporary events as well as people. Secondly, the book written in, you can say, by Amir Khusro is Khazain-ul-Futuh. Khazain-ul-Futuh is a book which gives information about the attacks which Alauddin Khilji had led towards South India or southern kingdoms. So all the treasure which had been looted and plundered by Alauddin Khilji's deputy or the military general Malik Kafur, this has been depicted, or this has been portrayed in Khazain-ul-Futuh by Amir Khusro. Apart from these two celebrated authors, there are many other writers like Shams-e-Siraz Afif, who had also written the same title book Tarikh-e-Firoz-Shahi. We can get information about the contemporary Delhi Sultanate or the life and times of the rulers of the Delhi Sultanate. Coming to the Mughal times or Mughal era, Akbar was a great patron of art and literature. And Akbar, or during Akbar's time, one of the greatest writers who had emerged was Abul Fazl. The most famous book written by Abul Fazl was Akbarnama. So this book comes into 3 volumes, or you can say 3 parts. In the first part, it deals about House of Timur or Taimur up to Humayun. The second part devotes to Akbar, and the third part is about the economic and governance. And this is the third part, which is often referred as Ain-e-Akbari. So all of you know that medieval time, wars, annexation, this had been quite common. So Akbarnama also gives information about the battlefields. Battlefields and the techniques being employed in those battlefields. It also gives information about the topographical details of the contemporary time. As far as Ain-e-Akbari, that is the third part, is concerned, Ain-e-Akbari is a mine of information, which gives information about the social customs, habits of that contemporary era. It also gives information about the contemporary Hindu philosophy and Hindu literature. Ain-e-Akbari also points out information on the military and civil services or civil servants of the Mughal Empire or serving during Akbar's time. So this information is very much vital for us to know about the era of Akbar. And all the historians who had been reconstructing the history of the Mughal era, they also had to read this book Akbarnama. Apart from this historical detail, Akbar had also asked Gulbadan Begum to write history, and she has written a book called as Humayunama. In this book, or you can say this book fills the gap what is not covered by any other, you can say, historian, because she was belonging to the royal family. She was the sister of Humayun. So this book gives information about the, you can say, personal lives of the ladies or the women of the Mughal harem. Their physical, their intellectual attainments, and how much influence they exercised on the ruler. That is all being given here in the book Humayunama. And you can say what were their interests, what were their, you can say, things which had been taking place in day-to-day life in the Mughal harem, that is being covered in the Humayunama. Apart from this, in the book written by Jahangir called as Tujuke Jahangiri, which is also like Humayunama, which is also like what you can say, that memoir. Tujuke Jahangiri. Jahangir mentions not about only of his own ruling period, but he also talks about the erstwhile, you can say, era of Akbar. And he had given a very much vivid description of the life of the people of Akbar, of Akbar's time, and he says that peace prevailed during his father's time. He also writes that in the land of the Sunni kingdom, Shias were being persecuted. In the land of the Shias kingdom, Sunni were being persecuted. But in the land of our benevolent father, Shias and Sunnis, or all the diverse sects, you can say, live peacefully. So it's a book, this book is a reflection of the contemporary times, because as you know that Akbar was pursuing a policy of broad religious tolerance, and that has also been mirrored in the book Tujuke Jahangiri. Apart from this, Tujuke Jahangiri also gives information about the wars, conquests, and the conspiracies, plus appointments and dismissal of the Mughal civil servants or army generals. So through this book, through this Persian book, we get a lot of information about the statecraft, about the governance, about the rulers, about the Mughal harem, or you can say personal life of the rulers also. Not only that, about the state, you can say that this Persian language had evolved in the Sufi khanqahs also. These are the places where Sufis reside. The Sufi literature is called as Malfuzat. The sayings of the Sufi being written in the literature, and that corpus is called as Malfuzat. So Sufi also led to the progress of Persian literature. So Persian language was not only for the court, not only for the people, but it also became a language of religious discourse. Plus, it integrated India culturally, because several Sufis migrated from north to South India. So Persian languages traveled from North India to Southern India. So in this way, you can say Persian language, or one who will be knowing about the Persian language, he can easily understand the you can say contemporary era of the medieval times. So definitely it's a mirror to understand about the medieval India. So all these things had to come in this question. Thirdly, the third question is again regarding the modern India. The question is, since the decade of the 1920s, the national movement acquired various ideological strands and thereby expanded its social base. Discuss. Since the decade of the 1920s, the national movement acquired various ideological strands and thereby expanded its social base. So, if you read this particular question, question number 13 in the GS paper 1, there are basically 3 words which are the key. Since the decade of 1920s, the national movement acquired various ideological strands, and thereby expanded its social base, 10 days back, one of my video regarding the strategy of modern India, means before this exam, before this 8th January UPSC Civil Services Mains exam, I have uploaded a video at the Next IAS, or the Next IAS has uploaded a video of Abhishek Parmar, where I was talking about strategy of modern India. And in that video, you will see the same topic, the same thing I have discussed in that video. And luckily after 8 or 9 days, it came in the form of a question. So, since the decade of the 1920s, the national movement acquired various ideological strands, and that led to, you can say, increase of social base. So 1920s, what is that 1920s? Basically 20s means the decade of 20s. So it's the beginning of the mass movement. Before 1920 or 1919, if you see Indian national movement in India or national awakening in India started its beginning somewhere around 1870s. But from 1870s up to 1905, it was the domain of the elite class. Because Congress was born in the year 1885, but Congress was dominated by a group of leaders who were called as moderates. And moderate leaders were elitist in nature. They did not want, you can say, they did not think that the time was ripe for the people, for the masses to participate. After 1905, Congress or the national movement was, you can say, dominated by the extremists, who again willing to associate the masses, but could not do, or were not able to achieve this thing. So mass movement became a phenomena, or came to be associated with the nationalist movement only with the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi. His simple life, his attire, his dress, and the way he led the nationalist leadership or the movement, he gave an example. And his simplicity immediately created a kind of response among the people, because people could easily, ignorant masses of India could easily relate with Gandhi. And Gandhi, through his, you can say, participation in the nationalist movement, through the opposition to Rowlatt Act, and starting with the non-cooperation movement, he, in a way, you can say, he hijacked the nationalist movement and gave it a popular base, gave it a mass appeal. So by 1920s, Gandhi has started dominating the nationalist movement. And how, you can say, important in those era was Gandhi, that he had support of the women section, he had support of the zamindars, though few, but yes, he did get the support of zamindars. He had support of two divergent, two diametrically opposite sections of the society. For example, jamidars as well as peasants, workers as well as employers or the capitalists, lawyers, women. So he had devised a comprehensive plan whereby the movement started acquiring a mass base, a mass appeal. As the nationalist movement, you can say, made progress, new ideologies were also touching the national movement, or we can say engulfing the national movement. And one of the dominant ideology from the decade of 20s onwards was socialism. Socialism, which was, you can say, made popular after this Russian Revolution of 1917, it started affecting the nationalist leaders, nationalist movement also. And within the nationalist leaders, several leaders from 20s or late 20s started drifting towards the idea of socialism. For example, S.C. Bose, Nehru, Meenu, Masani, Jayaprakash, Narayan, Ashok, Mehta, etc. There are several leaders, Achyut Patwardhan and so on. So these leaders were drifting towards the idea of socialism. And this drift towards socialism was also giving further push to the nationalist movement, further push to the peasants also. Gradually we will see that these nationalist leaders, these socialist leaders, later on established a party at Bombay, and this was the birth of the Congress Socialist Party in 1934 at Bombay. So this was one of the ideological strands in the nationalist phase of the movement. And CSP, Congress Socialist Party, was formed by this group of leaders, many more like Achyut Patwardhan, as I said to you. So CSP was to act as a pressure group within the Congress. It was not to function outside the Congress, it was to function within the Congress, and it was to act as a pressure group so as to pressurize the Congress to adopt pro-peasant policies. And they were very much sympathetic to the peasant cause. Outside the Congress, you see this rise of socialist leaders led to what? Emergence of Kisan Sabhas. So the ideological base had been widening and peasants began to involve in the nationalist movement. So various Kisan Sabhas were formed in different parts of India. Like one such Kisan Sabha was UP Kisan Sabha in 1918. Then formed Audh Kisan Sabha in 1920. So how the national movement started entering or penetrating among the peasants? As time passed, several peasant leaders started thinking that why we have different peasant organization. Why not all these peasant organizations should be merged together and formed an all India organization. So that led to what? These various peasant organizations and the leaders, they thought to merge all these peasant organizations, and that led to the birth of All India Kisan Sabha in 1936. All India Kisan Sabha in 1936 at Lucknow. So All India Kisan Sabha, there were several members, means the president of the Kisan Sabha, this organization was Swami Sahajanand Saraswati. In the meanwhile, this is 36. Previously, there was an act called as 1935 Government of India Act, and based on 1935 Act, elections were due in the year 1937. So these Kisan leaders, they went to Congress session, which was held in December 1936, same year, December 36, at Fazpur in Maharashtra. You see how the national movement is spreading its, you can say, legs, or you can say its footprint, because within the Congress also you will find rise of socialist leaders, and one after another, it were the socialist leaders who started becoming the president of the Congress. Like you can see, 1936, in the month of April, it was Jawaharlal Nehru. In the month of December 1936, again Nehru. In 38, Bose. 39, Bose. So this shows the dominance of the socialist leaders within the Congress. Outside the Congress, you see the impact of the socialist leaders leading to the formation of the All India Kisan Sabha, spreading its base among the peasant organizations. Working class was also influenced by the socialist ideology, and that led to what? Formation of All India Trade Union Congress in the year 1920 with Lal Lajpat Rai as the president. So national movement started spreading its footprint among the peasants, among the workers, and this attack or AITUC of 1920 started demanding, you can say, better facilities, better things for the workers. Workers who were earlier segregated and not united, now for them also there was an All India organization. Apart from this, you can say, princely states could not remain aloof from the nationalist movement. And to voice the concern of the princely states, in various princely states, what was formed called as Prajamandals. Called as Prajamandals. These Prajamandals were influenced by the, you can say, by the nationalist movement which were going in the neighboring British India. So Prajamandals, they also voiced the concern and they also wanted democratic rule in their states, in their kingdoms. And as awareness swept the length and breadth of India, the Prajamandals were also united and formed what is called as All India States People's Conference in the year 1927. If you read in detail, you will get to know that up to 1920 or 1938 up to, Gandhi ji had dissociated or had not allowed Prajamandals to launch any movement under the name of the Congress. But in 1939, he bridged the gap and he allowed that Congress name can be taken by the Prajamandals in the movement in their respective princely states. And in order to show the solidarity, the shift in the policy 1939, you see, in the year 1939, AISPC president was Jawaharlal Nehru. So this is the shifting, you can say, trend, and this is the shift in the ideology or Congress or the national movement being dominated by the various ideological strands of the time period. Not only the nationalist movement or the Congress, socialism as an ideological strand started influencing the revolutionary leaders also. Because among the revolutionaries, there was an organization called as HRA in the year 1924, founded by Sachindnath Sanyal, Jogesh Chand Chatterjee. But under the influence of the socialism as an ideology, HRA changed its name to HSRA in the year 1928. This S is actually the same, means the importance given to the ideology of socialism. So after 1920, you will see you will see more and more participation of the different class of people, and nationalist movement being dominated by various strands, various ideological strands, and spreading its footprint among the peasants, among workers, among princely states, among women, plus you can say depressed classes, So this way movement started spreading in different ways and trying to amalgamate all this different sections of the people within the national movement. And here also the importance lies both for Gandhi as well as Ambedkar. Ambedkar believing in self-assertion of the rights of the Dalits, who is also, you can say, pushing the Dalits into the mainstream of the political program, political movement. And Gandhi believing in paternalistic view of upliftment of the Dalits, also started, you can say, integrating the depressed classes within the national movement. So this way we can, you can say, understand that how nationalist movement is, you can say, spreading its footprint. So thank you, class. This is all about the modern history and one question which I have discussed in the medieval India. All the best. Thank you.